Hey, everybody. Welcome to the second edition of the Gentleman's Journal podcast, Iron Sharpens Iron. I am Brett Trembly, chairman of Gentleman's Journal, which is totally inconsequential for today because today is just about the podcast. So I'm your host for today, and I have three great panelists. One who is a repeat guest, so we made him kind of co-host, and that's Mr. Will Dukes over here. Will, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be back.
Quick little official introduction for Will Dukes. Will is a farmer by birth and scientist by training, studied molecular biology at the University of Florida, a teacher by trade. In fact, he won awards as a teacher, so let's not leave that out. But before starting his sales and marketing company, which is now he calls Feck and Fig. I screw that one up time and time again. Feck and Fig. And he can tell you why. There's a great story behind that name. But he opened a biotechnology magnet program for a Miami-Dade County public school system before starting his marketing company. Besides being a health-conscious entrepreneur, Will has multiple degrees in agricultural education and extensive knowledge of our modern food system. So he's kind of like a forever guest or panelist because I'm not the only one in GJ who knows he's smarter than all of us, and you can just kind of have a conversation with him about almost anything. So, Will, thank you for being here again, dude. We really appreciate you.
Glad to be back.
All right. We're going to come back to Will in a second. Next, I'm going to introduce the man sitting next to me, a stranger to nobody in Gentleman's Journal because he may work with more of us, including a bunch of us in this room, than anybody else. But if you're hearing this for the first time on YouTube or Instagram, got a really great story we're going to get into. It's Dr. Raymond Tolmos.
Hello.
Miami's first board-certified chiropractic internist. He's is a physician and entrepreneur focused on getting sick people well, longevity, hormone optimization, and performance medicine. So there's a lot to dive into there. He helps patients and high-performing individuals recover from chronic disease, optimize health, and slow down the aging process. You should see a picture of him 10 years ago. He looks 10 years older than he does now. Through evidence-based treatments, right? I mean, I'm not just... That's a compliment. So maybe we have a before and after on the podcast here, photo of you. But functional diagnosis that bridge modern medicine with proactive wellness and natural therapies. So, Doc, appreciate you, bro. Thank you for joining us today. And last but certainly not least, we have Eddy Rossel. I'm going to start with Eddy after this introduction because he has just a wild story. This man sitting right here in between Will and Doc used to be 127 pounds heavier than he is today, which if you just met him, like, you don't see it. It's really hard to picture that. Here's Eddy's background real quick. Eddy Rossel is a certified personal trainer and nutrition coach dedicated to helping men over 30 lose weight sustainably and reclaim their energy, confidence, and performance. Having personally lost, like I said, 127 pounds and maintained that transformation for over 20 years. So we're talking way before all the current advantages we have. Eddy brings real-world proof that lasting change is achievable even with the demanding career or lifestyle. Super important, right? This is basically geared towards entrepreneurs, and there's not a single one of us who isn't super busy. He now coaches men, which is executives, entrepreneurs, and professionals worldwide to build practical, lifelong systems for fat loss without extreme diets or burnout. So, Eddy, thank you for being here, my man.
Good to be here.
Let's start with you, dude. That is an insane amount of weight to both have on that frame, to lose, and then to keep off. And like I said, 20 years ago, so much different than it is today, you know, with a lot of the things people are doing that we'll get into, you know, right or wrong, good or bad. So tell us about that story, dude. What was it like being 127 pounds heavier? I think that's important. If you can sort of go back in time, right? So, like, was there something that happened that made you go like, this? It's enough is enough, right? Because it's not like you were 60 years old. I mean, you were a young man when you decided enough was enough. And how did you do it? And then how did you keep it off?
Yeah, so I was 19. So this was 2002. And the story was I was going to Miami-Dade College down here in Miami. Went to the first semester of school, hated classes, wasn't very motivated. Ended up taking a semester off. So I took that spring semester off. And I remember on March 1st of 2002, I went to a park nearby in the area where I live in Westchester. It's Concord Park. That place should have a statue of me.
Why March 1st? Why do you still remember that day?
I still remember the day.
Okay.
There was no significance to that day. And I just remember I stood there and I looked down and I said, wow, like I can't see my feet, like I had, big belly. And it was embarrassing and it sucked. But I remember, I don't know why, I don't know where I picked this up subconsciously through what I was consuming, maybe, I don't know. But somehow, some way, I knew that if I walked that day, it was better than what I had done the day before. And not only that, but if I did it the next day, it was better than what I had done that day. And just that step by step process, I understood the importance of that. I also understood to set realistic expectations that in a week I wasn't going to see a difference. In a month, maybe. So I didn't do it with these expectations of like quick results. I more so did it from a point of like, either I stay this way or I just start along this path, right? And so for me, it wasn't a results oriented thing. It wasn't this end point. I didn't know where I was going to feel comfortable because I didn't know what it was like to wait.
Did you grow up, a chunky kid or a big kid, for example? For lack of maybe a more politically correct phrase.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at pictures of me, like third, fourth birthday, I was little, but kindergarten, graduation, big boy, big boy. In kindergarten, I can show you that picture from graduation. I still have it, big boy.
You were the goalie back in the day,
I was
right?
not only was I the big boy,
Yeah.
but I have the bad eye, so I had glasses and I had the thick glass that you see in the cartoons or like I was that nerdy kid, overweight,
Baby.
with a thick glass. I wanted to get contact lenses. It's a funny story. I wanted to get contact lenses, and the doctor's like, "We can't make contact lenses that strong because it won't fit in your eye."
Oh my
Literally,
God.
because that's how bad. Because I've always had pretty much no sight from my right eye. I was born that way, so I don't know what it's like to see from the right eye. And so I was that nerdy fat kid.
Wow. And so that was you all the way until you were 19. Like you were sort of like, picked on. You were just always the big kid.
I wasn't picked on as much, but I some kids will make fun of me and stuff, but I wasn't picked on as much, maybe because I was bigger than them. They didn't pick on me.
You got to have a good personality when you're bigger.
It sounds like you grew up a little chunky because you dapped Eddie whenever he said he was
Frat boy for life, baby.
Yeah, all right. Not anymore. Not anymore. I'll tell you that. Eddie, not to cut you off, but man, what was, like I made the joke, you were the goalie. Like seriously, growing up, did you play sports, or you just were you sad growing up because you knew you were big, or you were oblivious and then one day you're like, holy crap.
I wasn't sad. I had a great childhood. You know, there was certain good things to being big. For example, when I remember in elementary school, we had tug of war, we had field day. Every team wanted
First
me at
pick,
the end of
baby.
that tug of war.
Yeah.
So I was first pick for that. I was last pick for everything else.
March 1st. So before you continue, when people see you now that you grew up with, you haven't seen him since high school, are they like, what the, like?
Yeah, they don't believe the people. Well, the people that knew me before are like, "What the heck," right? But the people that don't know, they don't believe me. I have to show them pictures.
Yeah, I didn't either, frankly. So, yeah. So, all right. So that, March 1st, something hits, like you said, like it has to be within, it can't just be peer pressure, any of those kind of things. You made a decision to not lose weight necessarily, but just to get moving and change kind of who you are and how you operated. So then, take us through the next few months. Did you get discouraged? Did you start losing right away? Like, this is pretty easy. All I got to do is, like, move my ass. Like, what happened?
Yeah, when you're that big, you start losing relatively easy if you're doing some of the right things. As you guys know, like if you're over, I was 297 at my heaviest or whatever I weighed. It might have been a little more than that. But when you're that heavy, you'll lose weight pretty quick, especially that first month, if you're doing most of the right things. I didn't have a plateau until about maybe after 50 pounds of loss. I started by walking, eventually running, or run walking, and then eventually running. And after about 50 pounds or so, 30, 40, 50 pounds, I don't remember exactly when, I started working out at the nearby Porky's, if anybody in Miami remembers Porky's. On Miller and 102.
Just the movie Porky's that was filmed in Miami. One of my favorites. I don't know.
So I started working out at Porky's, and I started lifting because then I throughout this whole process, you couldn't go on the internet and look up stuff. So I literally went to the library and looked up read about books. I read about eating wheat bread instead of white bread, or brown rice instead of all the stuff that maybe is not, now I know is not so relevant, but somewhat relevant back then, you know? I didn't cut out all carbs, but I cut out a lot of processed foods. Not because I knew they were processed, because I just knew that those foods were not going to help me with my goal. I didn't know that those foods make me hungrier. I didn't know that that's why I couldn't stop eating bowls of cereal after bowls of cereal, like processed foods, eating constant.
Love me some cereal. I see your face.
Yeah.
A little Captain Crunch.
My dad would get Frosted Flakes, and you know what I would do? I'd put the chocolate Nesquik in there and make chocolate milk and put the Frosted Flakes in the chocolate milk. And one bowl just wasn't enough because it's this processed food. Now we know
that's spoken like a true fat kid. I mean, there's levels to this. You know what I mean? I hadn't heard that one before.
But eventually I just started kind of learning, just reading and learning and educating myself. I used to get a lot of men's health magazines, and I used to read. And one of the most important things that I notice now looking back is I didn't lose weight just to see a lower number on the scale. Like that wasn't ever the point, you know? The point was I would look through these men's health magazines and I would see the 30-minute workout that's going to make you burn fat or whatever. That's fine. But then I would also see the fashion section, and I would also see the lifestyle section, and the thing about being a gentleman, or about being a good father, about being a good man. That stuff is what enticed me and what got me excited. And looking at the fact, I've always been into fashion, looking at the fashion thing and being like, I want to fit into that clothes. I want to be able to look like that. That stuff, that peripheral stuff, motivated me more than anything. And the weight loss was just a vehicle to get to that confidence, to get to that version of myself.
Eddy, what I love about this is, you know, again, I knew you had lost the weight, but I never fully heard your entire story. But we have somebody on the panel, if you will, or a guest today who has a degree in molecular biology, whatever the hell that is, right? An advanced degree, right? A chiropractic internist. And then we have just a self-made guy. And all three of those have to resonate in a different way with anyone who is lucky enough to hear this podcast, because like you read magazines and books and figured it out. That's super inspiring, I think, to the quote unquote everyday man, if that's not a throwaway term, you know, but that's wild to me that you just literally dug in old school and figured it out. Because a lot of people, like when Atkins was a thing, I was in college, we would just go like quote unquote Atkins. We just eat meat and cheese for about 4 weeks before spring break and just get shredded, right? Didn't really know anything other than that was the fad. But none of us ever thought to like look in, like actually learn what is sustainable and what's healthy in those things. So
I think that goes back, sorry to interrupt, Will, about what Eddy mentioned in the beginning, which is that like you have to have that why. You know, it's a lot of people, if you don't have that drive, it doesn't matter if you have it scripted out in front of you or if you need to go and look into magazines and figure it out, you know, but that drive to make that change is really what's necessary in any scenario. You know, you've heard that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink thing. I mean, that's the epitome of what I see every single day. Some people make the changes and some people don't. And it's the ones that have that why, the ones that find that reason, and the ones that make that part of why they're making all those changes, those are the ones that succeed. So whether you've got a degree in whatever or you don't, you still need that reason and that why.
Yeah, because it's not for lack of information, right? And I think that's the interesting thing that he's bringing up there. Like he didn't know or didn't have like, you know, what we have now and all these, you know, experts to come on and say this, that, and the other. He just knew like, all right, that's probably not going to help me in my goal if I eat that. I should probably walk a little farther, right? You know, the most basic things like eat less and move more, you know, calories in, calories out. But it's almost like we have too much information now, and a lot of people will get bogged down and lost in, you know, this expert says this or this diet fad or whatever it is. And then that becomes frustrating when, you know, if you just like major in the major things and really just kind of understand what is your goal, what is your why. It's never for a lack of information that people can't be healthy. And it's not a different, or it matters in what your goals are. I think the other big thing is people have to be conscious of what level of health they're trying to get to. Because like if you're trying to run an Ironman or be the cover model for Men's Health or something. Like that's a completely different level than just, all right, what do I need to do? What is the minimum viable dose for me to be active, or me to keep up with my kids, or to me have energy in the afternoon to be able to function on my business? Whatever that is, it may change over time, and you're going to be through different seasons in your life, right? In terms of what health is. So I think that's the other key to that, is just like having a realistic goal or knowledge, or, I just don't, maybe you're not just putting up with this. Like maybe you just wanted to see your feet, right? Or maybe I don't want to feel this level. And then those goalposts can move. You get to another level of health, but all that's going to change over time.
The goalpost definitely moves. You're absolutely spot on, Dukes. And one thing that I will say is, I tell people when they first say I have this goal, I think of a triangle, right? And think about, you have different people that want different things. And you have maybe like on the top, let's say you have performance, right? You're an athlete. You want to perform at a certain level, right? Over here, you have aesthetic. You want to look a certain way. You want six-pack abs. Guess what? If I'm a power lifter and I need to perform, that means I need to lift as much weight as possible. I'm not worried about how I look, and I'm not worried about having six-pack abs. And if I do have six-pack abs, I'm going to get beat by someone who is bigger and stronger, right? And then the other thing is longevity, the last part of the triangle. If I'm focused on longevity, which is what I'm focused on now, right now, I have no shame saying that I'm a nutrition and fitness coach, and I like to do the minimum viable dose of exercise because I'm busy, because I have a regular time, full-time job, and I have a business that I'm trying to build. So I don't have time to spend an hour or two at the gym, and I have a gym at the house. So I got no excuses, but I find ways to get the minimum viable dose so that I don't have to. Now, if a Saturday morning, I love it, right? Because I've got more time. I've got, I don't have things that I need to do typically on a Saturday morning, so I can spend an hour or two in there. But for most people, that's not the case.
Let's come back to that, Eddie, because I want to ask you, dive more into what you do and how you help entrepreneurs figure out how to squeeze in the time for the minimum viable. Right, but I want to segue over to Ray here. Doc, you made a few comments. Being a chubby kid, you probably can't tell what we're like just by sitting on this couch, right? But Ray is super athletic. He can hit a baseball a mile. He can throw a baseball or football a mile. He's fast. But so hearing you say fat kids for life, I don't really picture you. I know you play fullback and stuff, but I don't picture you as a bigger kid. Not necessarily that you can't be athletic, but let's get into your story. I know you've always been into sports, but what made you not only become a chiropractor, dedicate your life to helping a lot of men and women be healthy, as you've helped thousands of people here in Miami, thousands of clients. But recently, 7 years ago, you were 30 at least pounds heavier. So let's get into your story a little bit.
And before you do, I want to add to that: beat Chris Colston in the pass rush at Family Day.
Family Day, baby. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Growing up, Eddie mentioned the cereal and the Nesquik. For me, I was, getting a box of Oreos and mashing them up and putting them at the bottom of the milk and just letting them sit and just waiting for it. And because I played sports my whole life, I was able to eat a lot more calories, but I was always, on the chubby side. I was always
where were your parents, guys? That's what I want. That's what I'm thinking about.
Working.
Right? Yeah.
Well, as long as I'm coming from a Hispanic household, I had to finish my plate. I had, so my mom's job was make sure everybody's, fat and happy. And she did a great job of that because we were all fat and happy. So, for me, it was, I ate a lot of calories because I was expending them as well. I played baseball, football, the heavier I was, the better it was, So when I graduated high school, I was 215 pounds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but, I'm sitting down here. You probably can't tell. I'm not really regulation height. I'm only 5'6". So 215, that's clinically obese if you're looking at BMI, I was squatting a lot of weight and I was very strong and I played fullback, as you mentioned, which is just a glorified extension of the O-line. But Yeah. It was one of those things where if I can weigh more, I can move more weight. I can, like Eddie was mentioning, if I had a six pack playing fullback, I was probably not going to be able to block the middle linebacker. So for me
Listen,
being
shout out to
215,
the fullbacks. That 1 or 2 carries per game, man. That's like what you live for.
I had one game, 15 carries for 85 yards against Southridge, and it was like
Palmetto High, baby, right
Palmetto,
here.
baby, go Panthers. So, but in baseball, it worked against me. In baseball, I had to run a mile in under 6.5 minutes to be able to dress out my senior year. That took me 4 tries. I had to hold a rock in my hand with the Philippians 4:13 that said, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me," because Lord knows my fat ass wasn't running around that track in under 6.5 minutes without some help from the man upstairs. So,
But just quick side note, it cracks me up about baseball. They're
why you have to run
very
so
good
much?
athletes, but like the coaches all make you run a mile, and like you don't run that much in a season. Sometimes,
I know, it's
unless
insane.
you're playing outfield, but
It's insane.
anyway.
But it's more about injury prevention and that stuff. It's hard to stop and go when you play baseball, which is a big deal. Like you're cold and then all of a sudden you have to sprint 90 feet, so that conditioning is important there. But, the story is always grew up, strong, but, chubby. And then I had kids and then, I'm building the business and all the excuses hit, shit, to be honest, it wasn't even an excuse. I'd rather just sit there with my kid instead of going to the gym. And I had my kids during COVID. So most of the gyms were locked down anyway. And so, at that point, I was 200 pounds. I had my second kid. I got all the way up to 230. And it was just eating, drinking, and not exercising. And, it was one of those things that most people fall into. The family time comes and things start happening. So,
I always tell people I have a cousin, her husband's like really nice guy, but he's in his like early 30s, and he put on some weight, and I'm like, dude, early 30s, kids, like that's a time you're starting your career, getting married, having kids. That's the time when I think most people like, and it happens like that too. Like you just kind of wake up one day and you're like, damn, I'm bigger than I thought, and I think when you see yourself every day, it's so easy to just go knee deep in like the new kid stuff, and 2 years later you're 30 pounds heavier.
It happens slow, but it happens slow enough that it's hard to detect, but it happens fast enough that like when you see that picture from 2 years ago, you're like, holy hell, what just happened, So I was kind of at that point, my wife is very big into working out. She used to compete and all kinds of stuff. And so I'd see her going to the gym and making the time for it. And I'd be like, well, damn, what excuse do I have? So that's when I really got, more serious into it. I did 75 hard challenge. And that's really where I was like, I'm going to take the results that I get from here and I'm going to maintain those. And I did that for a long time. I actually called up Eddie when I was done with it because I kind of hit a spot where I was working out twice a day. I was eating a minimal amount of calories and the weight just wasn't coming off anymore. And I'm talking to Eddie and he's like, what you just said makes all the sense in the world. You've kind of hit that plateau. You got to focus on restorative stuff now. You got to get your body back in the game. And that's really when I got into understanding what's plagued me my whole life and what's plagued so many other people for their whole lives, which is not eating enough and reverse dieting and taking care of your metabolism. And I can't wait to get into this with Will Dukes because it's the biggest nuance in the calories in, calories out debate. And it's the calories that are out are very dependent on what's called your basal metabolic rate, which is how many calories does it take to just sustain your life every day. And when you take in less calories than you're supposed to, your body resets that number. And that's what was really hard for me to kind of get past. Cause I'm like, dude, I'm doing a 45-minute ruck in the morning with 45 pounds on my back. I'm going to the gym for an hour afterward. I'm eating less than 2,000 calories and I'm stuck at 200 pounds. And when I say I was eating less than 2,000 calories, I know for sure because since 75 hard challenge 3-4 years ago, I literally weigh every single meal that I possibly can. I prepare my food. If I eat out, but that's rare. Most of the time, my meals are all dialed in. I know exactly how much protein, everything that I'm getting every single day. So not being able to make a change, putting in all that effort, most people give up.
Let's back up for a second, and I totally agree. There's a lot to dive into there, but backing up, you had a decision after college what you were going to do with your life, like all of us. And I think you told me one time you kind of always wanted to be a chiropractor. Like that was something
since 14.
Okay, so yeah, That's cool, right? It's like one of those kids that kind of knows it and then attacks it. So tell us about like your education and why you wanted to be a chiropractor.
Well, let's take it back to 14 years old. My mom didn't let me play football before that because I was always injured already playing all the other sports that I played. And, football's known for the injuries. So I get there, and again, not being regulation height, I'm playing O-line, and I'm going up against these huge guys. And I'm like, Coach, how do I block this dude that's 6 feet tall? And he's like, oh, just put your face in his chest. So I'm like, all right, whatever coach says, that's what I'm going to do. So, I'm blocking these guys, and it's this constant trauma. It's like getting into a car accident, a couple hundred times a day in practice. And before you know it, I'm starting to get headaches. And before this, I had wanted to be a physical therapist because through all the injuries that I sustained in baseball and soccer and basketball and everything, physical therapy always got me right. So I did PT, but it wasn't cutting it. The neck pain, the headaches, the stuff associated with what I was doing now just wasn't helping. So somebody said, hey, try a chiropractor. I went to this guy, and he took some x-rays on my spine, showed me what was going on, put some heat on my back, electric stimulation, and then cracked me like a glow stick. And I was like, dude, I feel so good right now. Like, this is amazing. I walked out of that first appointment. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
I didn't realize that it was through that experience that's what did it for you. That's cool. Well, shout out to that guy. Do you remember his name?
Dr. Jeff Greenberg, who is now retired. He used to work on Galloway and Sunset. And thank you, Dr. Greenberg.
And send you all his clients since he's retired, right?
He retired, unfortunately, while I was in school, so I wasn't there yet. But yeah, it was really cool because, like, if you look in my high school baseball yearbook, it says, where do you see yourself in 10 years? For me, it says cracking people's backs. So that was a pretty cool moment when I went back to look at that.
Yeah. Let's sort of dovetail into the caloric intake outtake conversation. We're going to move over to Mr. Dukes. I made a comment earlier, like, where are your parents? It's funny because both of my parents graduated from college, right? But it's not like graduating from college means you got all the knowledge in the world. And my mom's a music teacher. So financially, they ran some businesses together, but no experience, no finance. And I've always thought that was kind of interesting. I wasn't taught a lot of lessons. I was more self-taught, even though they were a small business owner. And my parents have both struggled being overweight basically their entire adult lives. My mom has diabetes, and that has different things with it. But it's not like there are sectors of this country. We have very health-conscious parents, and they pass that on to their kids. And then I don't know, 80% just don't. It's like, just feed them, and then they'll be happy kids.
I mean, nutrition's not taught in school. It's not even taught in medical school. So it's one of those things where unless you really get that habit passed down, it's very hard to understand what to do. Like, Eddie had to go read magazines. That's where most people are. Unless you have that aha moment where you realize that, eating everything that I want to eat because it tastes good isn't healthy, you're going to run into those problems, so it's difficult.
Well, Will, not only, with your background in molecular biology, and you grew up on a farm, so I'd imagine your diet growing up was much different than Oreos stuffed at the bottom. Not that you maybe didn't enjoy. No, not different at all?
Not that. Yeah, that's kind of like one of the... one of the dirty little secrets, right? So we definitely ate a lot of vegetables growing on a vegetable farm, and a lot of that, you kind of get the cultural diet that comes with your heritage, whatever it is. It's one of the things I appreciated moving down to Miami, is kind of seeing those food traditions. But one of the things that I've always had interesting conversations about with folks, you'll hear people back where I grew up from talking about, it's like, my great granddaddy, and this is true, my great grandfather lived into his 90s, and like these were folks that would make their own sausage, and they stored it in a can filled with pig lard, and like they cooked in a pan and just dug out the lard. Like, that was a huge part of their diets. Eat all these bacon and eggs and everything else. But then I have to go and remind folks, like, yeah, but then they drove a freaking mule through the field like the rest of the day. And I saw one study I read at one point that said the average farm worker burns about 6,000 calories a day because they're just always up and carrying stuff. So yeah, if you're burning 6,000 calories a day, you can eat a 1,500 calorie breakfast and another big lunch and everything else, and it's not going to be that bad. So
Fat makes good fuel.
yeah, I mean, absolutely.
It's high
absolutely
fat
necessary.
keto diet nowadays. It's an option out there, right?
I mean,
Yeah.
what was Michael Phelps eating when he was competing for the Olympics? Some
It was like
ridiculous.
10,000
calories a
10,000
day.
calories a
The
day.
guys in the pool swimming, and his energy expenditure is through the roof.
But then what happens, right? And I think the same thing with like, rice and beans and Cuban bread and everything else. Very much the same way. Life gets easier, right? We're no longer using mules and hand plows. Now we've got a tractor. And so, you got, you'll see farmers very regularly that end up being very overweight, right? Because they're basically sedentary most of the day. Probably not as much as the average American, but still not doing like we were before. And you still kind of carry over like, oh yeah, this is what my grandma used to cook. He said it's mom's job was to keep you fat and happy, right? And that also used to be a sign of health and abundance and wealth, right? If everybody was just like a little bit plump, right? You were doing your job, you were feeding your kids, you were providing. And now it's like turned full opposite, where it's like you've got to be in the upper classes of society to have the time and the resources to be able to focus on your health, because otherwise you'll just descend into all these unhealthy habits that happen. So I think it's an interesting thing. And as far as like the kids go, like when you don't know, like, if you grew up eating graham crackers, there's definitely like a transformation in the food system over like the 80s and 90s and kind of this snacking culture and stuff that always wasn't there. And so you don't really realize how many calories you start eating. And yeah, you get your little box of Oreos, but I definitely did that same thing at some point. And, would put sugar on top of Frosted Flakes and stuff like that in the morning. And nobody ever said anything about it, right? Like it was expected and just kind of normal. And so I guess all three of us were like the chunky kids. So I was like 215 O-line in high school. And then after, actually I put on the freshman 15 going to UF, moved to the fraternity house. Right. And so then you've got,
What was the most you've ever weighed then?
so that was then in college. So I hit about 230. So that's been about the most I've been. And then like the lightest since then has been about 200. So I've been pretty much between 200, 210 since graduating. And then I owe a lot of that to my wife, because moving into the fraternity house, meals are cooked every day. And we had like an old grandma that like cooked soul food every day. And it was out there and it was just like a buffet. And, you're maybe walking around campus and doing all this stuff, but it's just like there and constant. And it's just so easy to eat more than you are putting out. And so luckily my beautiful wife, Shannon, she'd actually studied animal science, but changed into human nutrition and dietetics. And we got married my senior year. And a lot of folks, most people wouldn't get it. It's like a farming joke, but coming back, the guys that grew up around Okeechobee and like had all these cattle, they're like, went off, got married, you look like you're bred down, which was their way of saying like, oh, I lost. And because I had lost like 20 pounds in just the first 6 months or so of being married. And that was just by changing eating habits.
I think the theme of the first about 30, 45 minutes of today is, if you want healthy adults, just have really fat kids, because all our panelists talking about their delicious youths and how they were the chunky kids. I didn't know, Will, your backstory of I guess vacillating between 200 and 230, but I mean, there is something to be said with somebody who's just kind of born naturally skinny and maybe doesn't need to pay attention to diet, and they just kind of live their life. And other people, and I'll throw myself in there, who if I'm not careful, I can put on weight just walking past food, for example. And so you three have had your stories, and I think now you're very health focused, and maybe there's something to be said about that.
I don't know. The interesting thing for me now is watching my kids. And so like my son is never had any, like, he's been sticked in. The kid had like abs at 8 years old. And I don't know if that's just because of the kind of the food we keep in the house now and whatnot, or just like his habits. Because like he'll go through those freaking Z bars, or at least he used to. He's hit 14 now, and so like you start getting acne and stuff, and so he's kind of cut out refined sugars and things like that out of his diets. But now he'll like get the freaking Costco chicken and eat half a chicken for breakfast in the morning, and still stick thin. And so that's been like an interesting thing for me to look and watch. He must get that from his mom.
Yeah. This may be a topic of discussion or just maybe a quick side note, but the discussion we've always had, my wife and I in our household, is like, how do you teach your kids how to eat healthy without obsessing and risking, which happens a lot here in the U.S. too, food eating disorders, right? Or being too body conscious. My daughter, about a year ago, decided on her own, because we didn't say a word. She's like, I need to lose weight. And she, in about 3 months, lost like 15 pounds. She looks like a different kid, because she is like not even 5 feet tall. She's only 13, and holy cow. Like, first of all, super cool when your kid dives in and does something like that, right? But two, you see the photo and you're like, man, that's a big difference. But we were very careful to not say anything to her or be like, hey, sweetie, like maybe you should think about. We just let her naturally discover on her own when was the right time. I don't know if you guys have any backstory, and this may be personal, but we're a tight-knit group here, even though this is a podcast. But eating disorders or any like personal knowledge or stories around that?
I'm gonna jump in there because not only do I have my own kids who are a little bit younger, like 6 and 3, so they pretty much don't have a choice. Like whatever we give them is what they get. But I've helped a lot of people raise families, and it really depends on the kid, because there's some kids that if you approach them in a way that you say, hey, look, this is what's good and this is what's bad, and they have an understanding of that, and they're kind of a little bit more, I don't want to call it down to earth. I don't want to say they have a good grip, but there's some kids who are very lost in a lot of things. And if you give them that, hey, this is good and this is bad, they may want to rebel against that. So, there's a lot of intricacies when it comes to dealing with kids, especially once they get past that age of like 8, 9, 10, when they start to kind of make their own decisions a little bit more. Like my kids now, it's like, hey, I want snacks. And I'm like, no. And it's that easy, and it's funny because without really instilling it in them, like the other day, not the other day, this was probably 5, 6 months ago, I came home and my food wasn't cooked and I was like, man, I'm starving. I grabbed some pretzels. Gluten-free pretzels, by the way. And my kid is
shout out Phil Stevenson. He's in the audience here. Gluten-free, baby.
My kid, my 3-year-old is like, Papi, those make you fat. And I was like, I fucking love you, man. Like it's like by leading by example, I think is the most important thing we can do, because when you say, do what I say, but not what I do, it's like, okay, well, there's nothing behind that, but when they constantly see that you're also doing that, like my kids are, Papi, I want to go to the gym. I want to go to work. I want to, like they're constantly following the examples that you set. So when it comes down to how do you best teach your kids or talk to your kids about it, you don't have to say anything. You just have to lead by example. I think that's the most important thing when it comes to kids.
I also want to say something which is going to open up probably a whole entire conversation, but
let's open up the can, Eddie. Go ahead.
But I completely agree with what Tolmos is saying. And I also think that it's okay for your kids, if you go to a restaurant. I don't have kids, by the way, so I can't speak directly on this subject, but I can talk about being a fat kid, growing up as a fat kid. When you go to a restaurant, I want you to look at the kids menu and I want you to pick one healthy thing out of the kids menu. You got French fries, you got chicken fingers, you got pizza. Mac and cheese, right?
Nothing.
So you have to make it okay to be like, I'm going to order my son or my daughter a little side of grilled chicken and I'm going to cut it up for them and I'm going to have them have that. And I'm going to have that, they're going to have that with maybe some French fries if it's okay that day, or maybe some broccoli or whatever it is. But it's okay to not be normal, because I tell my clients, if you're going to go down this journey, and this is a side note, but if you're going to go down this journey, if you want to be healthy, get ready to not be normal. Get ready to be judged. get ready to go to a steakhouse and look around where 70% of the people are obese in the U.S.
Normal is dying of a heart attack in your 60s.
He said it because he sees people all the time. So when you realize what normal is, it's okay to not be normal. It's actually, you don't want to be normal. And I think that goes back to also what's going to happen, hopefully, with changes in school lunches, because I could not afford to have my lunch made every day. My parents didn't go to college, didn't graduate high school. They were first generation. They were trying to survive. And so they didn't know any better. And so I was left at the mercy of whatever the school system was going to give me, the public school system.
Pizza on Fridays, chocolate milk, cookies for 32
but that like
cents.
fake cheese, greasy pizza, man.
That
That's
boat
good
pizza?
memories.
I'm telling
though,
you,
right?
fat boy for life, bro. I mean, shit.
And but you're at the mercy of what's decided at a much, much higher level that you have no control over. And so all of it is processed. And like then all of a sudden I'm the fat kid bartering for extra food, extra chicken nuggets at the cafeteria, because I haven't eaten enough. I feel like I'm still hungry. And it's because I think we're all different, but I grew up where it's like, I know to this day, there's foods that I don't eat, that I stay away from purposely. I'll have them every now and then, but I know that if I eat them, I'm going to want more. Cape Cod potato chips. First example.
Can't stop, won't stop.
Can't stop, won't stop is that's it. I mean, French fries, like there's certain things that, and I'll have them, but I know myself and I know that it's going to trigger something in me and I'm going to want more. So I limit it.
Will can 100% tell you about this because you ask what the hell is that degree that he has. That's what all the people that make the foods that we eat have, which is how do we make foods that are hyper palatable, that are going to make people want to eat them, that's not going to tell them that they're full at all so that they can continue to eat them.
Buy more, yeah.
So
absolutely.
it's like you're eating all these empty calories that have no nutrition. They have all the nutrition stripped out and then put back in synthetically with cheaper vitamins that most people, based on their genetics, can't even really utilize. And then you're just sitting there eating and eating and eating, and they're like, I'm not even hungry. And then you need to eat something else. So it's the calories are crazy. The nutrition has nothing. It's like nature really provides everything we need. And these scientists strip all that out and put shit back in so that it tastes good and you want to eat more of it.
So Will's the bad guy.
100%.
All right. But before you comment there, Will, I think everybody has had this conversation multiple times, but I can look around the room and remember with at least 3 of the guys here, the same conversation about, well, I went to Europe and I ate my ass off for 2 weeks and I didn't put on a single pound, right? And there's guys here that have their pasta shipped in from Europe and like, well, then all of a sudden pasta's fine, even though we've all now learned that like pasta's not essentially great for you for every meal, for example. So that's like the new chic thing, right? Oh, all the food in Europe, but like, why is that, Will? What is happening to our food supply?
So the reason that they don't put on any weight when they go over to Europe, the thing that they don't think about is they're walking every fucking where
Exactly.
that they go to. And so like if you're walking around Rome, then yeah, you can afford to eat an extra 2,000 calories a day. So that's the one thing. Now, as far as like the sensitivity, like our friend Phil over there, or things to gluten, this has come up in some of our chats a lot before. The fundamental difference in our food system is the type of wheat that we grow. And if you look back in the 60s.
And what we're allowed to do to it.
We'll maybe debate that a little bit later. But the major thing is actually just the fundamental type of wheat. And so if you look back at like the ancient grains or wheat, we're getting closer, but even more than 100 years ago, like there were these old varieties of grain and they didn't have as much gluten in them.
What is gluten? Let's.
So gluten is a protein that is found in the wheat kernel. And so like through domestication over the last 10,000 years of our species, like people would find these wild grasses and they would pick the ones that maybe grew a little faster, grew a little bigger. And now all of a sudden you have these domesticated varieties. You harvest the seeds, they would dry them down, and then you could grind that down into flour. And even 100 years ago, 150 years ago, whenever you did that, you ground the whole seed down. And so you were getting fiber, you were getting the there's three parts of the seed, right? Without getting like too deep into that, there's the part that actually grows into the plant. That's where you get the protein. Then there's the white starchy part, which is what the seed is using for energy, and that's where
which is what's in all our food now.
And so you would get the whole piece. And so now when you get flour or things that are mass produced, generally all that other stuff has been stripped out. All the protein, the vast majority of the protein,
The fiber.
and all the fiber has been taken out. It's pretty much just starch. And then that's why you have like bread flour, pastry flour, all the stuff, which 150 years ago was like ridiculously hard to manufacture. And so only the richest of the rich, like Marie Antoinette, let them eat cake, right? Nobody had cake because they didn't have cake flour, right? It was only the super wealthy that could afford that kind of stuff. But then we get technology, and then we get advancement, and then we get into the 60s. There was a guy named Norman Borlaug. He actually won the Nobel Prize, and it was called the Green Revolution, because the problem with those old varieties is now the population starts to grow, because now we've taken care of a lot of diseases that used to, what was it? 1 out of 5, 2 out of 5 kids would die before they hit 5 years old. And so we get out of World War II, we've started to understand antibiotics. We start to have major advances in medicine. People aren't dying as much. What is it?
Sanitation.
Yeah, just basic sanitation around that.
Can we make sure we get that clip of just sanitation? Sanitate that.
Sanitation.
Make that a example.
So people start really worried about like, oh, we're going to run out of food. We're not going to be able to feed everybody. Borlaug goes in and does like just through controlled breeding. It's not like, people think about GMOs and all that kind of stuff. That wasn't back in the 60s. But they started hybridizing. They started trying to find varieties that would now grow faster, would now produce greater yields. But as one of my favorite economists, Thomas Sowell, says, there are no perfect solutions. There are only trade-offs. And so one of the trade-offs of developing those varieties of wheat is it changed the structure inside. So now they produce more gluten. And so when you get more gluten, that can be an irritant to the gut. And that's why most of the wheat that we grow in the U.S. is a hard red winter wheat, whereas in Europe, and especially in Italy, it's a soft white winter wheat, and there's just less gluten in it. And so that's one of the major factors in why people say, I didn't have that many problems when I went over into Europe.
This is why you can have Will Dukes on almost any podcast panel, right? And you're like, wow, I just get lost in listening to all the facts, and why it wasn't a mistake to have him here today, because that background, that distinction is important. But at least in a free society, right, not in an oppressive regime, technology is inevitable, right? You mentioned advancements in technology. That's not bad. We're trying to feed more people and have a better population where kids aren't dying. But there's going to be trade-offs. Now, is the extra gluten, is that just pure profit? Is it a nefarious thing to make more money? It's just a byproduct
of the breeding, but it does help in other types of processes that will be there. But it also just helps in the mass production of food. And so we could go down a whole different rabbit hole talking about the food system and subsidies from the government and what are we trying to do. But one of the other big factors there is that ultimately, at least since the 40s, one of the major goals of the government and the USDA is to make sure that we have a very cheap and abundant food supply, because a well-fed populace is not going to be necessarily rioting in the streets. And so that was one of the things we're very good at as a species. Like when we set a goal, if we put a number on a board or a metric, like we'll figure out how to get there, but then we may forget all the other things that come along the side of that. And so I think that's really where a lot of it has come to. Like, there's a free market society. I want to make a product. People like my chips. How do I make people want more of my chips? And people will get down there and they'll think about it in terms of this particular outcome, but then not think about the grander scale, because ultimately I'm accountable to my shareholders, and I'm not necessarily, I'm making fucking potato chips. I'm not trying to save the world. I'm just making potato chips. And so a lot of that can get lost. And like I said, we could have we could have the conspiracy chat conversation on another podcast.
Shout out to El Vecino, our location for today, one of the premium cigar spots in downtown Miami. Been here about 2 years. Unbelievable ambiance. Yeah, it's less of a sports bar crazy and more of a refined spot to come have a cigar and a whiskey. So thank you as well to El Vecino. I said we're going to jump back in where we left off with Dukes, but I do want to mention, speaking of El Vecino, we're talking about health, but yeah, we're up here. I have a cigar. Some of you guys have a cigar and a drink. I'm happy to, drink water today, but you made a comment, Doc, that, I don't know. How do you feel? Is this like we're being hypocritical up here by smoking a cigar and talking about health?
I don't, because health, and Eddie is probably the one that's going to be the best to attest to this. Health is all about balance. And at the end of the day, for me, I try to live like an 80-20 rule. That's why I weigh all my meals so that I'm perfect 80% of the time. 20% of the time, I don't do a podcast every day, so I don't have a drink and a cigar every day. It's one of those things where you still have to enjoy life. You still have to eat that Oreo. You still have to do that, because if not, it doesn't make all the sacrifice that you do make worth it. And when it comes to having a cigar, I was speaking to a friend of mine, reviewing some life insurance policies, and we were talking about nicotine popping up and the rating and whatnot. And he says, well, if you smoke one cigar a month, it's less than smoking one cigarette every 3 months in the eyes of the insurance company. And to me,
Wait, one cigarette every 3 months. Wow.
Versus one cigar once a month is the same rating when it comes down to it.
Let me take issue with that real quick, and happy to be wrong here, but I was just having this conversation, and I asked, of course, the ever-knowing ChatGPT, what is the equivalent for a cigar and cigarettes? And they said one cigar is like one pack of cigarettes. So you're saying that's total BS?
I'm not saying that. What I'm telling you is the way that insurance companies evaluate risk
Gotcha.
is much different. And they're the ones that are going through the data like crazy. So for me, yeah, maybe if you inhale a whole cigar, it's like a pack of cigarettes, but I don't know many people that inhale cigars. So yeah, obviously you're getting the toxins and you're getting everything that comes along with it, but there's also that balance, that enjoyment, that quality of life that you get from it, that stress relief. So again, it's all about balance. Some bad things for you have a positive trade-off for other balances in your life.
Look, 100%. I'm 80-20 guy also. 80% of the time I'm weighing my food just like Tolmos. I'm super aware of what I'm eating, about my diet. The other 20%, I'm going to have fun, and I'm going to have a cigar, or I love red wine. I love learning about red wine. It's one of my passions. My wife and I have traveled to different places. We went to Champagne. We did champagne tastings. We went to Bordeaux. Like, those are things that I enjoy that, again, go back to the reason why you're doing everything you do, is to become the person, the man you want to be, the woman you want to be. Why are you going to sacrifice the things that you love just, in the name of health? Now, look, if you're, what's his name, Brian Johnson, is it? The health guy, the longevity? Yeah. If you're focused 100% on longevity and you want to be that, and that's what you want in your life, and you're trying to live to 180 or whatever it is, you said it earlier. I don't know who. I think you said it or you said it. There's never, or no, Dukes, you said it. It's never perfect. There's always a trade-off. Always a trade-off. And it's the same in anything. If you want a psychological, when someone's going through a calorie deficit, right? And it's a client and they're like, I need a psychological break. Okay, we'll give you a psychological break. Take a week off. That's a trade-off. You're not going to lose as much weight that week, but you're going to have a psychological break, and you might come back better and stronger and more psychologically ready to win. And then you might kill it when you get back the next week, right? And so there's always a trade-off. It's never perfect. Sometimes those trade-offs are worth it. If you've ever seen things on, Blue Zones is kind of controversial, because I read that book, and I know that a lot of that, some people say they cherry-picked data, but regardless, what makes humans happy.
What is Blue Zones, though? Tell us before.
Is the fact that they looked at these studies, and they looked at the areas of the world that had the biggest clusters or concentration of centenarians, people that live over 100, right? And they looked at people like in Costa Rica. They looked at, so I think it's Sardinia, in California is one of them. There's like 5 or 6 of them. And they looked at all the traits, and they tried to say, what are these people all doing that is similar, unprocessed food? But then they come across certain things like Well, the people in Japan eat a lot of rice. Is rice bad for you? The people in Sardinia drink a lot of red wine, specifically Cannonau red wine. It's a specific grape that grows there. Those are different things that, and so is it the wine and is it the rice, or is it the fact that when you have a glass of wine, hopefully, if you're drinking responsibly,
Social.
at least for me, you're being social. And humans are social beings. And so you get more satisfaction when you think about your overall 100% holistic life and you think about a big pie. The big pie is 100%. Well, you got health in there, you got work, you got family life, you got social things. You got so many different parts of who you are, right? And so if you take away too much from one area, that's not healthy either. And so if you focus so much on health that you can't go out with your family and enjoy pizza night with your kids, that's not healthy. I would argue that that's unhealthy. And so you have to have some kind of balance. So that's why 80-20 rule works for me, maybe different for other people. I just had a conversation with someone in the crowd that said, yeah, I do a certain diet, but I cheat every now and then. Why? Because I need a psychological break, and then I go back to it, and it works for me. So the one thing I've learned throughout working with so many people and just working on myself over the last 20 plus years is everyone is different.
I also want to just say that 80-20 is great when you found that balance. You know, that's kind of what it takes, what I feel like it takes to maintain. Sometimes when you're really trying to make change, you really got to be 100%. But then you got to take that day or that, you know, that thing, like people be like, oh, you know, I have a cheat meal, you know, but that cheat meal might turn into a whole cheat day for a lot of people. And that's really going to disrupt progress. So you got to also look at, there's a lot of factors at the end of the day, which is so hard. That's why when it comes down to health, for me in particular, there isn't one set of rules that everybody should follow. There isn't one guideline that works for every single person because we all have different genetics. We're all different beings in our minds. You know, we all have different environments. So there's just so much nuance that goes into it that it's very difficult, which is why I do what I do, which is evaluate people physically, chemically, emotionally, and understand what are their individual needs. And that's how you should really you should be developing plans for people to improve their health.
You brought up that the Brian Johnson guy, right? So
is he the one that drinks the blood of his kid and all that stuff? Like,
I don't know.
Not quite.
It's like a tech bro or something. I think founded Venmo, whatever. But he like invested all this crazy money into, you know, getting the most optimal scores for everything and just figuring all this stuff out. And like, God bless him. That's like his thing that he wants to focus on right now. Maybe he does live into 180. Maybe he also gets hit by a bus one day. Exactly. And so the other thing for me is, you know, what are you optimizing for? And you can have that goal. We need to think about health as not a goal in and of itself, but it is a carrier. It is like this vehicle for us having the bigger picture of our life. And you can get so focused on optimizing some things like health that you forget all these other things in life, but there are still things that are beyond your control. You know, my dad taught me in a way, in kind of an offhanded comment one day, was just that you can control for everything but the weather. And that was like, always knew that on the farm, right? Like we do everything that we were supposed to do, plant at the right time, you know, water, fertilize, everything the correct. But if a hailstorm came through, we were screwed. You're done. And it's going to be the same thing with your health. You can get so focused on, you know, optimizing for this, that, or the other. And that at the end of the day, there's going to be some things that are always out of your control.
So I know you'll probably relate to this because I see you got a Whoop band on. I've used Whoop and I used the Oura Ring. I have an Oura Ring on. For those of you who don't know it,
I got mine on right here too.
So
damn, I feel left out.
It tracks sleep. It tracks a lot of things, steps, a bunch of stuff. HRV, we can get into that stuff. But there are times when I have to take this guy off and I have to take a break for a week. Why? Because I'll get up in the morning and I'm not thinking about how I feel. I'm going on my phone and checking that sleep score. And if that sleep score is not high enough, then I think I didn't sleep well. As opposed to getting up like a normal person and thinking, all right, do I feel rested? Like, how do I feel? And so that stuff, that over tracking and overdoing of everything, it starts to kind of backfire on you at some point. And you have to have awareness around that. And you have to put down the wearable or the whatever it is. Like, you know, if you wear an Apple, I wear an Apple Watch when I work out, but I know that the calorie counts on that thing are super off, right? And so you have to have awareness around what those wearables are doing and then how they're changing your behavior.
Not only the wearables, but like I have patients that weigh themselves every single day, and that will motivate them to do better or do worse. And weight is probably one of the worst things that you could possibly use to really judge what it is that's going on. There's typically
I feel seen. I feel seen every day. I weigh myself every morning.
and I do too. But I understand, and funny, weighing myself every day, I kind of realize your weight is really kind of like 2 days behind, you know? So you might be like, oh, damn, I had 6 drinks last night and I'm 2 pounds less today.
Let me drink more. Yeah, exactly. That's hydration, water, and
There's so many factors that go into weight, which is why tracking the right things is what's so important. So, you know, letting your sleep score get to you, a lot of people do that. A lot of people do that. Understanding it's like, no, let me go back and let me see, okay, what were the habits that I did that contributed to that so that I can make sure that I can work on those. But how many steps did I take? How many calories did I burn? How many calories did I eat? Those are really there's certain things that you want to measure and certain things that you don't. Body composition being one of them, calories in, calories out being the other.
Yeah, one of the big things I tell my clients is you're going to weigh yourself every day if you're okay with it, if it's not going to spark some kind of disorder, you know, psychologically.
Right.
But the other thing is you're not going to worry about the daily fluctuations. You're going to look at the weekly average. And you're going to compare that weekly average week to week. You're not going to look at the fluctuations because if you do, you're going to drive yourself crazy. The other thing you're going to do is you're going to measure your circumference, your waist circumference once a week. You're not going to do that every day. You're going to do it once a week. And if your weight is staying the same, but I know that you're strength training and I know that you're in a deficit and I know you're doing everything right, guess what? Your weight might stay the same because you might be losing some fat and gaining a little muscle, but that waist circumference is going to come down.
Yeah. I know I said we're going to get back to the science and what you were talking about, Will, but I want to just follow this train of thought. Let's go down the road of I want to hear from you, Dr. Tolmos, and also Eddy. Like, how are you guys helping men? And let's get into like the real stuff. Like, what are you guys seeing that's affecting men? We're, you know, late 30s and early to mid 40s here, you know, on camera today. And that's, you know, we got in Gentleman's Journal, some young 30s and some in their, you know, late 50s. But for the most part, right, mid 30s to mid 50s. So what are the things that we know we have to worry about and how do we treat those things? And then what are the things you're seeing creeping up more and more that guys aren't paying attention to? Like, let's get into the nitty gritty, right? We could talk about blood tests, about prostate, about the stuff that frankly, if you're not a self-learner like you, Eddy, and diving into books, you know, at least with social media, it's telling us more about what men need to focus on these days. But unless you're in a mastermind and you're being real, right, and you can open up and ask questions, you're probably not getting the information you need. So either one of you dive in.
Yeah, I mean, let me jump in, Eddy, real quick, because a lot of what I do is diagnosis. And for me, the most important thing that people realize is symptoms, it's like a check engine light. But just because your check engine light isn't on doesn't mean that your car is working the best that it possibly could. Maybe you're not putting the best fuel or the optimized fuel into that vehicle, and the performance is going to be less than what it could possibly be. And I look at Brent because I know that Brent loves driving some high performance vehicles. But that's really what we got to think about that our car is. You know, if you have a metabolic disorder and you're eating certain foods, it's like putting corn oil in your gas tank. It's not going to work. And the understanding of what labs and function, cellular function is the most important thing at the end of the day. And when I see most men come in, they're either doing the wrong type of exercise or they're eating the wrong types of foods or they're not doing anything right because they just have no idea where to start. And the first thing that brings them in and the first thing that everybody tells me is, Doc, I got low T. And I'm like, your testosterone is actually really good. It's favorable for your prostate in the long run, and it's enough to have you feeling the way that you should be feeling, you know, and you shouldn't be having any symptoms from this. Now, sometimes there's a psychological issue there, you know, if we're talking about like sexual performance and those kinds of things, but it can also be that maybe their body isn't making enough nitric oxide. Maybe their body doesn't have enough cellular energy in order to function. Again, metabolic disorder can really cause a lot of problems there. So understanding what those numbers are for me is the most important thing when it comes down to men's health, because you don't know what's happening on the inside unless you measure it. You can't change something if you don't measure it. And that's where we talked about all these wearables and all these things. That's super important because it gives you that data day to day. But really testing the blood and other analytes is the only way to truly know what the status of your health is.
Yeah, I don't know how this is going to play out just orally on a podcast, so I'll try to say this quickly and then you fill in. But like when you and I work together, we're looking at my blood work. We've done saliva testing. We've done gut health and several other tests. And again, just for me to tell you on a podcast what it's like, you sit with Doc on a Zoom call and about 30 minutes of, yes, it's easy to read these scores, but this is why this score is low. And then way down here, this is why this matters. And this affects this part of your blood and all the terms that I never hold on to because I don't try to. It's not my thing. But I'm just always blown away. Like, wow, when you start to look at the whole picture.
I mean, the whole thing really is understanding the minimal, like, how do you make cells in your body? So looking at a simple test like a CBC, which most medical doctors are going to run as part of your annual, if there's problems with your red blood cells, with your white blood cells, that means that there's something major going on in your body. Now, I look at a lot of other markers that most doctors don't look at, which tell me about other functions, like how you make antioxidants, what is going on with the way that your liver is functioning, the way that your kidneys functioning, and all of these organs serve certain purposes. So when we find dysfunction in one, your medical doctor might tell you you're fine, but that dysfunction over time is what turns into disease. And that's where, you know, we can really work on prevention instead of, oh, at this point now, I'm sorry, you've now developed this, even though this was coming down the pipeline, but we didn't really measure it. So now you got to take this medicine for the rest of your life, and you're probably going to have these symptoms for the rest of your life. And, you know, it's one of those things. So really the gut, it's the holistic point of view of the body. When you sit down, it's not just the blood. It's not just everything. So you got to look at the history. You got to look at that individual. Family history plays a big role because genetics, and Will can attest to this, genetics are going to load that gun, but the environment is going to be what really pulls that trigger. You know, one of my favorite jokes is that, oh, everybody in my family is obese. It runs in my family. And I'm like, no, nobody runs in your family.
Runs in your family.
You know, it's
yeah.
it's one of those things where you got to evaluate all the different aspects. And that's the hardest part about it because your medical doctor's not doing that. That's really the biggest thing. Your medical doctor's telling you you got a disease or you don't. And if they tell you you don't, what you take it as is you're healthy.
I'm good. Yeah, absolutely.
I stopped trusting regular doctors a long time ago because of everything he just said. I have had low T, I've had high T, I've had low everything, high everything. I've had chronic stress, and I've had my hormone. The body is a symphony, man. The body is a symphony, and every little instrument plays its role, and they all have to be working together because they all support each other. And you have to be able to understand how all of those play together. He understands that better than I do. But I can tell you that you want to know your numbers specifically after 30, 35, when you start losing muscle, when you're, look, a lot of, at least me in my 20s, I was going out late, I was drinking, I was not getting enough sleep, doing all the things that you think are normal. When you go to college, you do that, but you don't realize until afterwards that all of that stuff is so detrimental to your hormone health.
Kills you.
And you don't, and so you go into your maybe 30s or 40s, maybe you have a sales job, maybe you're doing entertaining clients, maybe you're having happy hours 2 or 3 times a week, and you're traveling and you're changing time zones, whatever it is. Those are the people that I work with have to do all of that stuff. You don't realize that all of that stuff is impacting you at a cellular level. And so I get tired of people saying, oh, it's just part of aging. I'm getting older. No, aging is your cell not working right. At the cellular level, as Tolmos said, aging is essentially your cells not doing what they're supposed to be doing or not doing it as efficiently anymore. And so you have a lot of different levers that you can pull to be able to make those cells be more efficient. And that's what you try to do when you're trying to balance all of those hormones, micronutrients, the right macros, you know, not having too little of one thing, not having too much of the other, all that balance, right? So all of that stuff has to work together because it's incredible, but the body is a symphony. And I mean, it's hard to look at just one thing and know for sure. And so that's why I stopped trusting doctors a long time ago, because they're not looking at why you have a headache, why you have high blood pressure. They're just saying, you have a headache, here's a pill. You have high blood pressure, here's a pill.
This is how you manage it.
Yeah.
Right.
They're managing the symptom.
Medicine is about managing. Cause. Right. So Eddie just mentioned something perfect, which is one thing doesn't tell you anything. Most doctors are only going to measure glucose as part of what's called the comprehensive metabolic panel. Your glucose could be 86, which is a perfect number because let's say the range is from 80 to 100. That's what shows up on Quest. If your insulin level is at 13, but your glucose is at 86, that's extremely unhealthy. It's taking way more insulin to get your blood sugar to an acceptable level. Now, in the beginning stages of diabetes, this is what happens. It's called insulin resistance. Most medical doctors aren't going to look at your insulin levels. They're only going to look at the glucose. So it's not that they're not trying to find out if you're healthy or not. It's that it's just not part of the protocol. It's just not part of what they're taught. It's just not part of the screening process for these diseases.
Also not how they make money. They make money by you coming to see them and then they prescribe medicine. That is essentially the system, right?
Volume, not volume.
Yeah,
not
I'm
results.
a bit empathetic because not only, as Tomo said, they're not taught that, but the whole ideology, the whole way and the thought process of a doctor, the way that they're trained is to diagnose based off symptoms. It's not to go down to a root cause. That's why I started going to functional doctors back in 2015 when I had low T for the first time in my life. And I was like, what the heck is going on? I have no energy to do anything.
What age was that?
2015. I'm 43 now, so that was 11 years ago. So I was 32 years old.
32 years old with low T, like that's not a disease. That's not a disease. That's dysfunction.
Yeah.
So a medical doctor is not the place to find that,
Yeah.
So what did you do, Eddie? Sorry, well, let me. Like, what did you do outside of just saying, no, I take testosterone supplements now or shots, whatever? I don't think that's what your answer was. So, like everyone out there that could have low T or knows they have low T, and then they think the only answer is let me just go get on testosterone. Like, what?
There are guys that do that in their 20s, and now they're trying to fight the battle of trying to have normal T, because once you get on it, it's hard to get off of it.
For life.
Yeah, for life. So when I had low T, it was chronic stress, new job, living 1,500 miles away from my dad that was struggling with mental health issues. He had just attempted to take his life at the time. My mom and my sister were there, unfortunately, and fortunately they were able to call the rescue, whatever. Everything ended up working fine for them, but that was a lot of stress. And so I had a new job. I was also doing high intensity interval training 5 days a week and running marathons. That is not healthy. Talk about what he said earlier about overtraining. I've been through that. So I knew when he told me, he's like, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'm like, doing too much, man. I've been there. I know what it's like. I was doing Sean T workouts. Insanity.
Shout out Sean T.
I love Sean T. Probably not going to watch this podcast, but he's amazing. I love you. But man, I was doing those workouts 6 days a week, resting on a Sunday, but then also doing 15, 16-mile long runs on a Saturday to get prepared for the Chicago Marathon. I ended up running 5 full marathons when I lived in Chicago and Nashville combined.
After being almost 300 pounds.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I got into some triathlons. I loved them until I hurt my knee, right? Probably overuse. But it goes back to the point of just because you're running your butt off doesn't mean you're healthy. Just because you lost some weight doesn't mean you're healthy.
Recovery.
Like you can overdo it and do the wrong things and not be eating the right thing. So it's not just about body fat; it's about the whole picture.
I wish I still loved running as much, and I do love running, but I don't run long distance because I'm a believer that it's just not that healthy for you anymore. Humans are not made to run marathons.
3 miles.
Yeah, 3 to 5 miles, and I'm good.
3 miles.
Because, and I have a lot of friends. All my friends. I lived in Chicago for 10 years. I moved there knowing 0 people. All of my friends were through running clubs. I showed up at a running club. I was like, hey, I'm Eddie. I want to run and whatever. I did that in Chicago and in Nashville. And I'm telling you, I made some of the best friends in my life through that running crew. And I was best man at multiple weddings because of it. They were best men at my wedding. Like, these are incredible people that I, to this day, have as best friends. But I don't run anymore like that, because it's not healthy. There's actually studies that are showing now that it's cardiovascularly not healthy to do long distance running.
Look at all the marathon runners that just die from heart attacks.
Just dropped dead. Yeah.
It's unbelievable, but
maybe it does run the family, right? That family's onto something.
So one of the reasons is because whenever you have your heart rate elevated, one of the things that happens is your body is pushing everything that's in your blood through your cardiovascular system. One of the things that's running through your blood is your cholesterol. And this is one of the biggest, and you asked me earlier, which is why I wanted to just mention this really quick. What can men look at to really determine, what kind of risk do they have? Most medical doctors are looking at a conventional cholesterol or lipid panel, which tells us about our value of LDLs and HDLs, total cholesterol and triglycerides. This tells us absolutely nothing when it comes down to risk. 50% of people that have a heart attack as their first sign of any type of cardiovascular disorder and die from it have normal cholesterol levels based on these numbers. So what I talk about with my patients is we need to run a more in-depth cardiovascular panel. It's called a Cardio IQ. You can get it done through Quest, through your insurance. It doesn't cost you that much money, but looking at the particle sizes is what's important. So for example, your LDL is 100. LDL is the bad cholesterol, quote unquote, good and bad, right? But LDLs, that value is going to be made up of a certain amount of particle sizes. So for example, $1 can be made out of 4 quarters or it could be made up of 100 pennies. You have the same exact value, but a much different amount of particles or pennies or coins that are making that value up. So if you're a marathon runner and your LDL value looks like it's good, but it's made up out of all pennies, every time your heart pumps, which is going to be at a much higher rate while you're running these marathons, because as you exercise more, your heart rate increases. All of these little particles are damaging the artery walls and migrating through them. And plaque doesn't sit on the inside of your arteries like a piece of gum sticking to a wall that just picks stuff up. It's these small, dense particles that migrate through the walls, become oxidized, bind to calcium, create a foam cell, then create a fatty streak, and then the particles actually start to make the walls close in from the outside in, from the muscular layer, the intimal layer of the cell of the artery. And this is where heart disease comes from. So people could be developing this and have absolutely no idea. But a simple blood test could help determine, do you have pennies or do you have quarters? When you raise your heart rate, are you actually pounding your arteries with pennies, or are you having these large quarters bouncing around, not causing any problem?
That's fascinating. I hope people are getting a lot from that. I told you it's fun to just not fun. I pay the guy, and you should, because the expertise, I love hearing those sort of things. And it's a reminder for those of us who are not scientifically inclined, who don't know all the details. It's I would have never known those things had I not met you, or not, if it wasn't for GJ. And just fascinating. What are, and I know you're going to jump in here too, Will. What are your thoughts?
Kind of the earlier questions, I think that plays into it. Is what should we be looking at? And one of the big things in men's health, I would say an overarching theme that I see and I notice, there are a couple. And one is that maybe it's because of the advice of doctors, maybe it's just culture, but we do try to focus on just managing symptoms. And I think that's one of the things that maybe affects us as men a little bit more than our lady counterparts, is because we have some other goal, right? We're focused on the business, or we're focused on the job or the career or stuff around the house, whatever it is. Right. And so I just need to get rid of the symptom. If I can make the symptom go away, then I'm okay. Then I don't need to go to the doctor. And so not having the curiosity to get to that core fundamental reason that's causing that, I think that's one of the issues that we have. And then the other thing that I would say is just broader. I think that also just comes out of mental health, and we haven't really talked about that, and maybe that's a whole different type of conversation. But I think for guys to have the motivation and the wherewithal to be curious about their health, or to seek out a new diet plan, or to be willing to change what's comfortable and what's the habit, and what their how their mom cooked for them, or whatever it is, you've got to be in a good headspace to do that. Because there are definitely days that, I had to get up and dive right into work, and all right, I can hit the gym this evening. And there's been plenty of days I've gone to the gym in the evening. And there have been plenty of days where I've gotten off that last call of the day and I'm just I'm done. And it's not because I'm physically tired like I was growing up on the farm. I've been sitting behind the computer on Zoom calls all day. But it's just I mentally cannot make myself get up and go to the gym, because what's the consequence otherwise?
I
right?
mean,
It's not no short-term consequence.
those two go hand in hand.
Absolutely do.
There's a book called Peak Performance that I read while I was doing
read
the
that too.
75 hard challenge, and your mental and your physical output, they're kind of the same. If you expend as much as you possibly can mentally, you're not going to have anything left physically. And so we have this kind of window of time that we're able to either really work our asses off, or work in our business or on our business for that specific time. And that's when we're at our peak. Outside of that window, we're functioning kind of less optimally. So balancing the physical and the mental is also an extremely important part, as Will brought up.
Yeah, we could sit here and chat for at least another 2 hours, because there's about 20 things that I want to follow up on that we're not going to have time for. But I want to take some questions from the crowd as we kind of, it feels like we're just getting started, but we're actually need to like wind down soon. So we had during the break, some guys had some questions. So who's ready to ask? Anybody? Go ahead. I'll you say it and I'll repeat it.
Just want to hear your thoughts on processed foods that are made with seed oils.
So we had a question on processed foods that are made with seed oils. Seed oils is a big new conversation that's circulating. So
Dukes might want to start.
I'm going to let Dukes take this one. Yeah. And then I'm going to jump in after Dukes.
And then
jump
he's
in
going to
too.
tell me why everything I just said is
We're all
wrong.
gonna jump in.
Right. So, all right. The whole, from what I can tell, the big issue that people have with seed oils, and it's like one of the, back up, one of the interesting things I've noticed overall in health, right, is like there's always kind of these fads of what's healthy, what's not. I remember, us all our age, we remember where like, only have like 2 eggs a week.
It's always extremes.
Right. And then like, oh no, eggs are the new superfood, and like all these other things.
The right
And,
eggs.
with seed oils, 10, 15, 20 years ago, it's like, you need to increase the amount of polyunsaturated fats that are in your diet. And there is plenty of research to back that up. And so now, at least in certain circles, or kind of, where you get your information from, seed oils are now the devil. And there are some, the other interesting thing, about that I know about science, right? Having come through that field, you read all these papers. One, a lot of shit that makes it into the media is a hyper, it's almost like a caricature of what the actual research was. Like the scientists
hyperbole.
in the paper,
Yeah, it's hyperbole.
Yeah, they could have said like one thing in the conclusion, like, we noticed that there was an increase in reactive oxygen species after da-da-da-da-da-da. And then that's like this tiny little footnote in the paper that's missing the entire point of the overall research. But some jackass on Instagram will go and say, this research found that if you eat seed oils, like you're going to be impotent and die, and within the next 3 years. And we know that's not true. And so I think we have to take a lot of this stuff with the grain of salt. And there's been a lot of interesting conversations. Like I like guys like Peter Tia and Andrew Huberman, also like Lane Norton and folks that are kind of at slightly different places on the spectrum around all that stuff. The main thing that I would say from my research in seed oils is like we've been eating seed oils for a long time. The key that it ultimately comes down to for me in a lot of these conversations, you got to have the curiosity to figure out what works for you, because we can have all the studies and people can point to all these studies. All those studies come from very small sample sizes, right? And even if we have like meta-analysis over all other kinds of things, like, we could have something on dairy. Well, like human beings evolved the ability to eat dairy after being an infant, like in 2 different places in the world. And there's plenty of people that can't. Right. So you can't just take generalized advice.
That's lactose intolerance, by the way.
Yeah. Well, all kinds of other things beyond lactose intolerance. But same thing with seed oils. Like I think one of the best things that anybody can do at least once in their life is an elimination diet, and just like get down to the base things. And you're going to find certain things that are going to affect you differently. They're going to affect other people. And so if you eat things that are eaten or that are made in processed seed oils, canola oil, soybean oil, whatever, and you find that you have a negative reaction to that, then avoid that. And if you don't have a negative reaction to that, then don't. I have personally found that I cannot eat I'm not like have Crohn's disease or celiac or anything like that. I can eat gluten and bread and whatnot. But I know if like over the holidays, if I'm eating a lot of refined carbohydrates, I'll break out in psoriasis and like it'll just pop up on my face. And so I know I cannot eat a lot of that. And that probably is indicative to my own genetic code. But that doesn't mean that, everybody should get rid and like nobody should eat, any processed carbohydrates ever, because different people are going to process things differently.
The biggest thing that you just mentioned something that I see so much, and especially in social media, is this happened to me, therefore
It's going to happen to you.
Exactly. And that is so flawed. That thinking is so flawed. To think that, look, I've done keto. I did carnivore for 6 months where I ate ribeye steaks and eggs and ground beef.
That sounds delicious.
And I did keto. I used to poke my finger to look at my millimolar ketones in the blood. I did all of that back in like 2015, 2016. I've done all of that. And you experiment with all that stuff and you realize, to Dukes' point, everyone is different. My wife avoids dairy here in the States because she breaks out. We go to Paris. She has butter and cheese and everything, and she's fine. I don't know what's in there or not in there, but there's some difference there, right? It just, everyone is just different.
You mentioned Cape Cod chips. If I eat, just off the shelf Cape Cod chips or any Lay's chips that are made with seed oils, right? And what I found is if I eat a potato chip made with beef tallow or avocado oil, I can eat the same volume of potato chips. If I eat a bunch of seed oil, my blood sugar is like out of control, no matter how much insulin I take, not coming down. Versus if I eat the beef tallow chips or the avocado oil chips, my blood sugar is perfect. And it's regulated, it's all good. And I don't need to take quick bits. So,
You want to summarize that, Brett?
Yeah, I don't know. Does anyone want to chime in and summarize?
Yeah. So I'll take that. So we had a question from the audience. He's a type 1 diabetic. He's been that way since how long? Since what age? Since 15 years old. And what he realized is that when he eats chips, for example, that are made with seed oils, his blood sugar is uncontrollable. If he has a chip that is made with the same ingredient, I'm assuming a potato chip that's made with avocado oil or with beef tallow, that his blood sugar is much more controllable. What I'm going to say here is that there's a few different factors. Number one, the rest of your diet influences how you respond to this particular food. There's a certain balance that's recommended between unsaturated fats, poly and monounsaturated, MUFAs and PUFAs, right? Omega-3s, omega-6s, and omega-9s. And just to give you an example, omega-3 should be the predominant type of fat that we ingest. We should have a 2-to-1-to-1 ratio of omega-3 to 6 to 9 in our diet, which means we should be eating way more fish than we are eating red meat and other seeds and other things like that, because red meat, arachidonic acid, omega-6, a lot of nuts and seeds have omega-6 and omega-9s in them. So the average American diet, to give you an idea, is something like 1 to 27 to 42 or some crazy stupid number where we ingest way less omega-3s and omega-6 and omega-9s. Now, fats burn in a carbohydrate flame, which means if you have problems with metabolism of carbohydrates like a diabetic, you're going to have a harder time metabolizing certain types of fats. Omega-3s, those omega-6s, and omega-9s are going to be burning differently through oxidative phosphorylation, which is the process of how we turn fat into energy. And that's going to affect your insulin level.
I love it when he says phosphorylation.
What'd I say?
I love it when you say phosphorylation.
You like phosphorylation? Me too. It's one of my favorites. Gets my wife as well. So, talking to the molecular biology degree. But there's a very individual kind of imprint on that. What I will say to your question about the seed oils is that your metabolism has a lot to do with what's going on there. But the more predominant fact is, what do these seed oils typically present themselves along with? In other words, most of the seed oils, when we compare them with what types of foods we're eating, are going to be a lot harder for your body to control. So if you're eating a potato chip, you're talking about a simple carbohydrate with a fat. For some people, that's hard to control their metabolism with. For some people, it's easier. In your case, being type 1 diabetic, it's very difficult. The saturated fats and the mixture of that same carbohydrate respond to your metabolism differently. But the biggest thing is that most people getting these seed oils are getting them with processed foods, highly processed foods. And that's really where the seed oils are getting their bad name from, because there actually is a lot of evidence that shows that seed oils themselves are good for cardiovascular health because of the type of fats that they have within them, the polyunsaturated and the monounsaturated fats. So at the end of the day, you have to look at each individual and understand what is the ratio of fats that they're getting and what kind of fats can their body handle to really understand, is a seed oil healthy for them or not. So again, it goes back to, there is not one general guideline. It goes back down to eliminate as much processed food as you possibly can, and that's probably going to be the healthiest answer for you.
Yeah, I love the scientific term. You could have made all that up, and I'm still just overly impressed.
It was
and,
all good.
Slightly turned on, just like Duke's saying. So we're gonna round this out. You mentioned glucose, and that's not only what you got to also look at your insulin levels, which is funny because I'm wearing a glucose monitor right now, right? So I've been doing this for a few months. And right now I'm on a low carb diet, so my glucose is like pretty damn even. And even when I was doing more of a low calorie diet, not necessarily, worrying about carbs, if I eat protein first, then
you don't see much of a spike.
I don't see as much of a spike. So it's like, and Eddie, I know I've heard you talk about this, like get your protein and focus on X amount of protein per meal. I can't believe how much we didn't get to today. This is crazy.
Unbelievable.
All the stuff that we should talk about. Well, part 2 maybe, because there's a lot more to go down on. But I want to just give a PSA for PSA, meaning a public service announcement for your PSA score. My grandfather had prostate cancer. My father had prostate cancer, and he had his prostate removed about, I think, like 14 months ago. Still having some ill effects there, but, is what it is. It was his choice to go down that road. You don't always have to get it removed. And early on, I've had prostate issues, which, with your help and all that, I work on and I take supplements for. But, just pay attention to your PSA score. It's going to be different, I'm sure, like we talked about. Every individual is different. But if you see a spike, then that's an early sign, that men need to pay attention to. So I just want to throw that out there. And you don't know unless you're getting your blood test and your blood work. And so, if you're sitting out there and you don't have a group of men, that you're not in a mastermind like Gentleman's Journal like we are, there's still going to be someone in your area that is going to be able to help you. So you've got to start testing your blood. What age would you guys say, like, hey, if you're this age, like, you got to start?
Honestly, your heart attacks, your Alzheimer's, all of these chronic diseases, they don't happen overnight. These things begin in your 30s and in your 40s. That's when your body really starts changing. And if you're not measuring already at that point, you're behind the 8 ball.
And I will add to that by saying that one of the things that I never really thought about is, and you know this from testing and seeing so many testosterone levels in men, you can have 1,000 testosterone and feel the same exact way as someone at 500.
Free testosterone is really what matters.
Right. Free, but also like testosterone is a number where it's very individual to the person. I've had 500 and I feel great. I've had 1,000 and not felt as great. And the reason why I bring that up is because you want to know what your testosterone levels are at when you're healthy and when they're peaking, which is in your 20s. And so that's one way to do it, is to check it at least a couple times in your 20s if you're early enough to be able to do that, because then at least you know what your baseline and what your peak looks like. And that way you have a baseline to compare to when you're in your 30s and 40s and 50s.
That's great advice. I think all of us are going, damn, I wish I knew what mine were, right?
Wish I knew
in our peak in our 20s.
For most of us, but some of us have kids, and when they get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's not too late to start, right? Like, you can still track your trend wherever you're at and kind of compare it to other things, but it ultimately is going to be down to that personal thing. And, I want to jump back to one thing, because, we kind of ragged on the modern medical institutions today, and I think that is with just cause in a lot of cases. But I will say that I am encouraged by some of the other doctors that are coming out. So I live in Orlando now. I can't go see Ray all the time. But I've had Ray do my blood work, and then I've got a direct primary care physician, young guy, and so he's much more open to broader tests and things like that. And I've had to kind of push him on some things because he didn't, naturally wasn't going to include certain things that I know Ray would have included in my blood tests before. So you have to kind of learn and educate yourself and figure out what you want to know, because all that information is out there. And so I would just go back to be curious about a diet, see how your body responds to keto or low carb or whatever it is, because you are going to be different in a lot of ways.
The best diet is the one you can stick to. That's the best one.
Say that again, Eddie. I want to make sure.
The best diet is the one that you can stick to consistently.
All right, let's do this. Everybody, let's go down the line. Tell the audience, right, if you will. Again, new podcast. We don't know how many views we're going to get, but you guys came here. You gave us your time. You gave us your knowledge. Tell everyone how they can get in touch with you. And Will, I know you're not selling health services, but talk about your damn marketing company, man. You're here.
Yeah, so my company's Feck and Fig. And we help lawyers grow their law firms. We help them to cultivate clients. And we particularly focus on their intake and lead management systems. So if you know a lawyer that would like to get more of a return on their marketing by improving their intake, that's something we can help them with.
Thank you, sir. Eddie.
So I work with men 30 plus that want to lose. It could be, 20, 30 pounds, 40 pounds. And I do that from a number of different perspectives because different men have different things going on. I don't have kids. They have kids. They have different lives than I do. They can commit to certain things that I maybe, or I can commit to certain things that maybe they don't have the time to commit to. The other thing is mindset. I focus a lot on mindset because when I stepped into that park when I was, almost 300 pounds, like if I didn't believe that I can lose weight, then I never would have gone there to begin with. So many people blame their metabolism. I work with weight loss specifically. So many people blame, but this can apply to anything, to health, to being healthy. They say, I'm in my 40s, I'm in my 50s. This is a normal part of aging. If you say that, then that's what's going to happen. You're going to continue to age. If you're in your 30s and 40s, you need to start strength training. You're going to lose muscle every year, so you need to battle against that. And it's never too late. All you have to do is start with up here, and you have to believe that you can do it. There's nothing stopping you, and it's not your metabolism in most cases.
All right. Thank you. Doc?
Well, guys, my practice is here in Miami. I do have patients in other states and other countries. I can do a lot of work remotely for people. I do love to have people come in and get a good physical exam with them. That plays a big role for me. I'm not like most functional medicine doctors that are just going to run labs and use supplements like medications. My real goal is get down to the root cause. How's your body working on a functional level? And we use everything from supplements to diet to exercise recommendations to newer therapies like peptides and even regenerative medicine like stem cells and PRP and all kinds of different things. So whether it's looking younger, feeling younger, finding out why you feel the way that you feel, or trying to prevent disease or trying to live to 180, that's what my biggest goal is. Try to help people live longer, live younger, feel better, enjoy their family, have a quality of life, find out the root cause of whatever illness they have, or prevent whatever type of illness they may be genetically inclined to develop. You can find me on Instagram at Dr. Frontier. If not, I don't know. You just find me. Just find me. Look for me. You'll find me.
Hey, you got a great domain. Tell everybody.
Chiropractorinmiami.com.
Speaking of peptides, I can't believe we didn't even get to GLP-1s today. Like, again, there was so much that we just didn't get to, and
I almost went there too.
Yeah, that's
Red or True Tide.
That's the nature of it. So again, Will, Eddie, Doc, thank you guys so much for being here. Hope you got something out of today. I know I sure did. And signing off for our second episode. Thank you guys.
Been a pleasure.
Great
Thank
to be here.
Awesome.